Hello, and welcome once again to the Gilbert and Sullivan Radio Theater. This is your host, Jerry Tracy,
knave,
inviting you to join us as we survey, among other fascinating items, all 14 of the comic opera masterpieces of Gilbert and Sullivan in chronological order. Our musical excerpts are drawn from the vast radio theater collection and include great recorded classics from the past as well as modern performances. Our dialogue features our own beloved KBCS players. Well, listeners, today we've planned a respite from our relentless survey of the comic operas. In the works already presented, we've heard that unique Gilbert and Sullivan creation, the comic Baritone, in several incarnations, as the very modern Major General Stanley in The Pirates of Penzance, as Thespis, and as John Wellington Wells in The Sorcerer. Let's pause and take a closer look at this fascinating character, shall we? Now, in order to review the art of the comic Baritone, it will be necessary to utilize the official KBCS corridor of time. Where's that button now? Here we are. I think that does it. Yes, I think it's shifted into gear. All right, let me set our controls. Our goal, January 21, 1887. Well, that's a little loud for the. Let's turn down the. There we are. The Savoy Theatre, London. Well, let's get that sound again now. There we are. I think that's a perfect setting now, where the very first Gilbert and Sullivan comic baritone, Mr. George Grossmith, is preparing for the opening night of Ruddigore, in which he will portray Robin Oakapple. Let's open this large door marked 1887 and walk back through the centuries until we reach our goal. Ah, there's the door. Let's peer into the last century together, dear listeners.
If you wish in the world to advance, your merits you're bound to enhance. You must stir it and slump it and lump. Oh, the dickens! I'll never get it right.
Sir?
Lily, we've got to run through that. Curse it, me boy, you can take it from me again. Dash it all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is truly a great moment. This is Mr. George Grossmith, the first master of the Gilbert and Sullivan patter songs. And here he is, actually rehearsing his Act 1 patter song from Ruddigore. Sir?
Lily, here, let's run through that damned patter song again. If I've told Gilbert once, I've told him 1,000 times. Enough with these ridiculous patter songs. Let him try and sing these dreadful things, How would he like it?
Sir, I don't think...
say, I'd never recognize you in that makeup, Lily. You look positively grotesque.
Mr. Grossmith,
Mr. Grossmith, is it? Well, aren't we formal tonight? Don't think I'm going to forget about that 3 quid you owe me. And what the devil's wrong with your voice, man? You sound dreadful. You've got to sing lead tenor tonight. I ship, do you see?
No, Mr. Grossmith, I'm afraid you're mistaking me for Durward Lely, the originator of the romantic tenor leads in the Gilbert and Sullivan operas.
Wait a minute. You're not Lely.
No, sir.
Who are you?
I'm Jerry Tracy, the host, writer, and producer of the KBCS Radio Theater.
Just how did you get in here anyway? Dragons! Dragons!
Yeah, but, sir...
Get out of my dressing room this
dear.
instant. Or I'll be forced to
I see
summon
we'll
the
have to
constable.
administer the aroma of acceptance. Mr. Grossmith, have you had the opportunity to smell my lapel carnation?
Smell your what?
Get very close.
Oh, well, that's an odd fragrance.
Hello, Mr. Grossmith. Feeling better?
Oh, much. Thank you.
Now then, Mr. Grossmith, I come from 1993.
Oh, I can accept that.
We have a radio show featuring the works of Gilbert and Sullivan broadcast over the airwaves by the manipulation of radio frequencies utilizing the low-noise frequency modulation technique developed in the late 1930s.
I can accept that, too.
Now then, sir, our listeners are most anxious to meet the great little man who created the comic baritone roles and who inspired Gilbert to compose his patter songs.
Oh, they are. Well, so am I. Where is he?
No, sir, I meant you.
Oh. Me?
With you as our guide, Mr. Grossmith, we'd like to sample the recordings of your many successors.
Recordings?
Yes, sir. A technique which will be developed later in the laboratories of the American inventor Thomas Alva Edison, by which vocal and orchestral performances can be preserved and played back at will, utilizing a vibrating stylus initially, and then later magnetic tape, pulses, and finally rays of laser light energy.
Oh, what?
Aroma!
Oh, Oh, yes, I can accept that.
That's very good. Well, let's turn now to a very early recording of your first successor, Walter Passmore.
My successor?
Yes, sir.
I don't suppose we could start instead with one of my,
Recordings.
Recordings, yes.
No, sir. You see, you left no recordings.
Oh, I see. Pity.
Yes, that's how we feel about it, sir.
Yes? Oh, really? That's very flattering. Thank you.
Well, here then is a bit of Walter Passmore singing the patter song, I've Got a Little List, from The Mikado, recorded in 1900.
Passmore? Do you mean to tell me that they let Passmore succeed me?
Yes, sir.
My understudy. So solicitous as to my health. You're looking a little tired, Grossmith. Why don't you take a long weekend, Grossmith? Ever ready to leap in and assume my role.
Well, let's listen to Mr. Passmore sing, then.
Very well.
Someday it may happen that a victim must be found. I've got a little list. I've got a little list of society offenders who might well be underground and who never would be missed. Who never would be missed. There's the pensioners who nuisances who write for autographs. All people who have flabby hands and irritating laughs. All children who are up in date and fly with them flat. All persons who in shaking hands shake hands with you like that. And all third persons who on spoiling Tate-Tate insist. There's none of them be missed. There's none of them be missed. And he's got them on the list. He's got them on the list. And there's not a there's not
Good heavens, that sounded ancient. And it won't be recorded for another 13 years.
Yes, but early recording techniques quickly improved. Here's a recording of your second successor, Sir Henry Lytton.
Lytton? That lad who helps with the props? Oh, he's a clever lad.
Yes, sir. We have a 1929 recording of Sir Henry.
Sir Henry?
Performing Sir Joseph's song from HMS Pinafore.
Oh, a delightful role. Sir Joseph is describing how he has risen from office boy to the head of Her Majesty's Navy. Sounds a little like Sir Henry Lytton,
When I was a lad, I served a term as office boy to an attorney's firm. I cleaned the windows and I swept the floor. I polished up the handle of the big front door.
He polished up the handle of the big front door.
I polished up that handle so carefully that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
He polished up the handle so carefully that now he is the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
As office boy, I made to mark that they gave me the post of a junior clerk. I served the writs with a smile so bland, I copied all the letters in a big round hand.
He copied all the letters in a big round hand.
I copied all those letters in a hand so free that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
He copied all the letters in a hand so free that now he is the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
In serving rich, I made to name that an article clerk I soon became. I wore clean collars and a brand new suit for the pass examination at the Institute.
For the pass examination at the Institute.
That pass examination did so well for me that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
That pass examination is so well for he that now he is the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
Of legal knowledge I acquired such a grip that they took me into the partnership. And the junior partnership, I ween, was the only ship I ever had seen.
Was the only ship he ever had seen.
That kind of ship so suited me that now I am the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
That kind of ship so suited me that now he is the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
I grew so rich that I was sent by a pocket borough into Parliament. I always voted at my party's call. I never thought of thinking for myself at all.
He never thought of thinking for himself at all.
I thought so little they rewarded me by making me the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
He thought so little they rewarded me by making him the ruler of the Queen's Navy.
Now, landsmen all, whoever you may be, if you want to rise to the top of the tree, your soul is infettered to an office stool. Be careful to be guided by this golden rule.
Be careful to be guided by this golden rule.
Stick close to your desks and never go to sea. and you all may be rulers of the Queen's Navy.
Stick close to your nest and never go to sea, and you all may be rulers of the Queen's Navy.
Mr. Grossmith, perhaps you'd care to tell our listeners, how did you come to be associated with Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Sullivan?
Well, let's see. Oh, that was at least 10 years ago, yes. 1877. Mr. Sullivan, the celebrated composer, had seen me performing the role of the learned judge in The Trial by Jury, an amateur production, of course.
Had you done much professional theater?
Oh, good gracious, no. Unthinkable at that time for a professional social entertainer. No, I worked my comic speeches and routines in the YMCA auditoriums, which were considered socially acceptable then. Remember that the professional stage was generally held to be a cesspool of vice and sin, with some justification, incidentally. No popular society entertainer would dare risk his reputation by appearing in a burlesque theater, singing comic opera.
But you took the risk.
Yes, I was getting bored with the YMCA crowds. I wanted to try something new, something a bit naughty.
So you took the role of the sorcerer, John Wellington Wells.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. I have no real singing voice to speak of.
So we understand.
Yes, What? Oh, well. Anyway, I was astounded that Mr. Sullivan was actually considering me to play the leading role in an opera. At the audition, he sang me a bit of the patter song, "My name is John Wellington Wells."
Yes.
He has a wonderful voice, incidentally. He said, "Can you do that?" I said I thought I could, though I had my doubts. "Very well," he said. "If you can do that, you can do the rest."
Really?
Yes, I confess I felt so uncomfortable about my singing that I finally asked Mr. Gilbert whether he didn't think the sorcerer should be played by a fine man with a fine voice. But Gilbert told me that's exactly what we don't want.
That's a good story. Thank you.
No,
Mr.
not at all.
Grossmith. Well, next in the dynasty of your successors after Sir Henry Lytton was Martin Green, who assumed the comic baritone roles in the D'Oyly Carte Opera Company in 1934. He was quite similar to you physically, and among all of your successors boasted your crystal-clear diction.
Thank you.
Here he is singing Bunthorne's song from Patience. Perhaps you'd care to set this up for us?
Oh, yes, certainly. The high-minded transcendental poet Reginald Bunthorne, so named because he was such a thorn in everyone's bun, is extremely popular with the young ladies of the village, who find his medieval garb and flowers irresistible. For some reason, when the adoring maidens depart, he finds himself alone on stage and announces to the audience that it is all a sham, a pose to assure the continued admiration of the ladies.
Am I alone and unobserved? I am.
Oh, he's quite good, quite.
Yes, one of my favorites.
Oh, please, play some more recordings of this Martin Green.
Okay, let's listen to his version of the Nightmare song from Iolanthe.
Oh, yes, the Lord Chancellor is desperately in love with one of his wards. Patience.
Phyllis.
Beg pardon? Oh, yes, Phyllis. Oh, well, all the soprano roles are the same, you know. The Lord Chancellor struggles against his feelings, as he would place his parliamentary career in jeopardy, to say the least, if it were discovered he had fallen in love with one of his own wards. So he has nightmares, as he explains in this patter song.
Here then is Martin Green singing the Nightmare song.
Goodness, they're both of 'em
Now, Mr. Grossmith, I'm sure our listeners are all very curious. How on earth do you manage to remember all those words?
Ooh, well, let's see. It's really as simple as memorizing a nursery rhyme and reciting it, except that there are more words. Many, many, many more words. And you have to say them fast.
I see.
Very, very, very fast. Nothing to it, really.
I see.
Oh, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. Who was my next successor?
Ah, Peter Pratt. He assumed the comic baritone roles in 1951.
They will still be performing the Savoy operas in 1951.
Oh, for far longer than that, sir. Here is Peter Pratt singing King Gamma's song from Princess Ida.
Oh, yes. A fine song, though the opera was something of a flop.
Why wouldn't go that far?
It was certainly a shorter run than we were used to. Of course, some suggested at the time that the show failed because I had so small a part in it. I say this in all modesty, of course.
Oh, of course, of course. Well, you commented to Sullivan about that during rehearsals, didn't you?
For some reason, Gilbert wrote a very small part for me in Princess Ida, the character of Ida's father, King Gamma, a shriveled misanthrope. I remained off stage for the entire second act. Anyway, King Gamma's line as he's being dragged off to prison in Act 1 is, "This seems unnecessarily severe."
Hear, hear.
Well, during a rehearsal, I asked Sullivan what he thought that line meant. "This seems unnecessarily severe?" He explained that Gamma was complaining about his imprisonment. "Oh," I said, "I thought the line referred to my having been detained here 3 hours a day for the last fortnight singing it." Well, Sullivan laughed and let me go, agreeing to call me only when he needed me. I'd never have pulled a prank like that with Gilbert, I can tell you.
I'd like to play a modern recording now, sir, featuring Benjamin Luxon singing the very last patter song written by Gilbert and Sullivan from the Grand Duke.
Oh, I don't know that one.
No, sir. The Grand Duke will not open until 1896. Sadly, the last of the G&S operas.
The last, you say?
Yes, it will run for only 70 performances or so.
Oh, 70. And were the reviewers kind to me?
You did not appear in the Grand Duke, Mr. Grossmith.
I didn't. Oh, you mean...
Oh, no, sir. No, you lived many, many happy years after the Grand Duke closed. But I'm really not supposed to tell you about that sort of...
Well, thank you. Kind of you to say so. Then I wasn't in this Grand Duke.
No.
Well, perhaps that's why the run was so short.
Well, we thank you for listening. Yes, Mr. Grossmith is having some indigestion over there, I hear.
Bark.
Yep, there we are. Mr. Grossmith, not at all. Just get in your little costume and get off there. Well, we thank you for listening as we presented this peek at the art of the comic baritone. Our cast featured the lovable KBCS players, actually only one of them this week. That was Bill Mott, actually, if truth be known, playing George Grossmith. Bill, thank our listeners, please, for...
Cheerio!
Thank you. Very well done. Please join us next week as we begin a spectacular 4-part presentation of HMS Pinafore. Sadly, Bill Mott is not in that production, but join us anyway.
Bigger and better things.
Yeah, but join us anyway.